My name is Carla Morales, Chair of the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. March will mark the anniversary of when life changed for us all. The unprecedented pandemic impacted every aspect of our lives. Despite the challenges faced, we at the Chamber are grateful for the opportunity to work with our partners and our members. We are committed to learning and adapting in order to succeed. We invite you to engage in a series of roundtables where we will discuss what is the shape of economic recovery. Through collaborative work, we will connect, we will learn, and we'll put into action insights and ideas. For more information, please visit our website at www.tucsonhispanicchamber.org or call us at 520-620-0005. Together, we will shape Tucson's economic recovery.
Recovery is neither V, U, or L. It's actually a K-shaped recovery. For those of you that don't have awareness of it, the simple K-shaped recovery means that it's an unequal recovery. And the facts support it. We've remained in that state because of COVID, with the jobs picture for those sectors that were hardest hit. We will remain that way until COVID is substantially behind us. That means that the recovery in late 2021 is possible in a V shape once those jobs start coming back, but I really see the opportunity in 2022 for the economy to be fully on fire once all those jobs in the service sectors that were hardest hit come back to full employment. Here's the good news. The good news is that today there's substantial investment going into technology, new innovation, new products. There's a lot of growth in different sectors. And the second factor is that the stimulus will also help generate additional spend in the economy and help accelerate the jobs picture. So I'm very excited about what is happening here, but it is clearly, to me, a K-shaped economy.
The economies of Mexico and the United States are strong and are competitive, or where integration framework and economic integrations will allow the two countries to thrive together and to recover from all these social and economic effects of this world pandemic. So I am sure this recovery will be comprehensive and will be quite fast because of the hard-working societies that characterize Mexico and the United States.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carla Bernal Morales, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to this amazing event. I am the chairwoman for the Tucson Hispanic Chamber, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the first of the series of roundtables at the beautiful JW Marriott Resort. Isn't it a beautiful day? Amazing. I'd like to welcome our very special guest, Congressman Raul Grijalva and his staff member, Cassandra Becerra, as well as, yes, of course, as well as Consul Raul Barceló Durazo from the Mexican Consulate, Consul Adscrito Enrique Gomez Montiel, and of course, our board of directors in attendance today, Oscar, Pati Ruiz, RJ Saavedra, Jennifer Herrera, and a few others. If I don't see you, thank you all for joining us this morning. We want to thank our distinguished panel, Ted Maxwell, Marisol Flores Aguirre, Liz Pocock, Danny Nee, and our moderator for this morning, Kanisha Raymond. We are excited to present today's roundtable because we believe that together we will move forward. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation and discussion. We invite you to all to continue to visit our website at TucsonHispanicChamber.org. And at this moment, I'd like to welcome and invite Isabel Jordelos, Interim President and CEO of the Tucson Hispanic Chamber, to join me for the rest of the event as your MC. Thank you all so much.
Well, good morning, everybody. And I guess I should help you hear me a little bit better. First off, I can't say how wonderful it is to have you all here outdoors in this opportunity to come and engage with us in the roundtables. This has been something that inspired us at the beginning of the year. And we wanted to create a safe environment for us to come together for our first time. And what could be better than this view at the Marriott? So thank you to our hosts for allowing us to come here. Yes, you can clap for the Marriott. As mentioned, we are so honored to have Congressman Grijalva here present with us today. We'll be hearing from him a few remarks. We'll be hearing from Dr. George Hammond from the University of Arizona, who will give us some insight on what he sees for economic recovery. And then we will have this distinguished panel talk to us about the insights they take, not only from the words of Grijalva and Dr. Hammond, but also from all of you. So there will be an opportunity for questions as well. But before I take you there, I would be remiss if I didn't thank people. And there is quite a few people to thank. First off, the community partners that engaged with us in recording stories and responses to our question. So thank you all that are present. Also to our, of course, corporate sponsors and members who support us all year long and help us create events like this. Our members, of course, who have stuck with us even through this time of challenge. They're still with us and we are here for them. So thank you to them as well. And lastly, I would have to say thank you to our incredible team, a mighty team of 4 that work behind the scenes, and the great partnerships we've created and built throughout this past year and prior to. But no more than this last year did we really see the value of collaboration and community. So thank you all for being here for our first one. Before I do that though, we've also had losses this year. Many of us have been touched by it. One of them recently was a friend of the chamber, Leonardo Ciscomani, a friend of the chamber who died tragically this last Undersecretary of Economy for Sonora, SEDCO, el licenciado Leonardo Ciscomani Frener. We lost him this last weekend to a tragic accident. I would ask for a moment of silence for this gentleman. Thank you. Losing people has been hard, but more this year. We also lost other leaders. Lynette Jaramillo, Alan Curtin, and we also celebrate and recognize the life of Supervisor Elias, this is his 1-year anniversary. Community is important. People are important. Thank you. It's now my pleasure and honor to introduce Congressman Grijalva, who will say a few words to us about his insights. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. I'll be brief so that the distinguished panel and that discussion. Oh, that's why people are standing in front of it. I thought it was just. No. Anyway, I want to thank the Chamber for the invitation. Isabel, Clara with a K. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. And Clara, I really look forward to your career change. I think it's a great opportunity for you and for the rest of us to see that as the wave of the future. And I'm glad you're there. I wanted to very briefly, I was talking to someone earlier, and I said that, I think it was Mr. Maxwell, I said, well, it's kind of a cloudy crystal ball that I'm going to talk about right now in terms of where we're going. I know what's been done in terms of the role that the federal government, Congress, and this administration need to play going forward. And part of what we have to do is that you have to put it in the context of what we're in right now and what we've been through for a year plus. And that context is the pandemic. That context is 570,000 of our fellow Americans have died from it. Millions have been infected by it. And you know it is a serious health issue when you know somebody or you know of someone that has either lost their life or has had to deal with this as an illness. It's huge. And I have tried really hard never to underestimate this. If you put a personality on COVID-19, it would be evil, it would be insidious, and it would be unrelenting in the way it has affected America, its people, and its quality of life, its economy. And going forward, and so I can talk to you about where we're at right now. But I can also, attempt to look into that muddy crystal ball going forward as to what Congress can do, and some of the things that it might do in terms of continuing to robustly and adequately invest in the rebuilding of the economy and the quality of life of our nation. When you put it in the context of the pandemic, the effect of that pandemic has been devastating. On the human side, no question. That's data, that's verifiable, and we're still struggling with getting shots in people's arms and making sure that we make communities and individuals whole going through on this health issue. But we're also struggling with the obvious, and that has been the effect on the quality of life / the economy of our nation. Work, opportunities, and those have all been affected. Revenue has been affected. And when you have 40% in some sectors of businesses that are not coming back, primarily in communities of color and startup businesses, one has to know that has been devastating in the overall development of our economic base in this country in terms of jobs and the circulating of revenue in our marketplace. That's bad. And so rebuilding that, I think, requires a robust response. We did initial one, then we did the CARES Act, but that was an intervention into the health crisis primarily. And now we did the Recovery Act that the president signed March 11 into law, and $1.9 trillion to begin to look at and invest in the spectrum of things that have been affected by this pandemic. Concentrating on the health still and the response, but also beginning to deal with quality of life issues and how we sustain and central to that question has been the issue of sustainability. How do we sustain stabilize, and then begin the growth process and the rebuilding process. I think that's where we're at right now. And we have to go beyond that going forward. Infrastructure bill that's coming up is a good example. Reconciliation as a possibility in terms of a budget is a good example. And what we appropriate and don't appropriate. I think a large, comprehensive, robust infrastructure bill that deals with many of the questions that we're dealing with in this country in terms of the economy, the financial side of our growth, can be addressed in that infrastructure package. No question about it. And in terms of private, public investment and partnerships, I think that I believe, and the discussion is around how you segregate that to make sure that if we're going to invest, is it a bank, is it a trust, is it a service that concentrates on that partnership and that partnership only in terms of its accountability and lending practices. Otherwise, that effort is scattered all over many departments, commerce, treasury, etc. And so I'm a big believer in that, and a big and a robust infrastructure package. So running through this whole infrastructure package, you will see, and that's where some of the political debate will occur around, weave through it all is the issue of equity. That as one thing this pandemic showed us is it opened the door that I would venture to say many of us in this room knew it existed. And that was a door that opened, and people got to see disparity. They got to see underserved communities. They got to see a history. And they got to see a response that initially did not address that disparity. In terms of the business, small to medium business, it certainly did not address that disparity. And so now, going forward, that is weaved and should be weaved throughout the process. The other thing that's weaved throughout the process is the climate mitigation that is going to be required in this. I'm not going to spend any more time, not because I'm afraid of the issue, but because I'm not going to spend any more time arguing about climate change. If somebody wants to be in denial, let them be in denial. But the reality is that we have to move forward and deal with this consequential crisis on the planet and in this country. And you have to do it with mitigation, and you have to do it as part of an infrastructure package going forward. And that's going to be weaved through that. Also, it's going to be weaved through that is the sustainability of what we do. Que ya cuando terminemos, let's say, an infrastructure package, we need to sustain that. We need to watch it and nurture it to grow. We need the forces of the marketplace to come and play the role that they should. But this initial role it needs to be the principal partner in this initial role needs to be your governments. They need to be the ones generating the investment, stimulating the economy. And I continue to promote the idea that the role that government is playing now and the role that it will play is essential. It's a partnership. It's not a takeover. It's not anything other than what government is supposed to do when its citizens are in crisis, regardless. And so I think that's the role we need to play. It's a supplemental role. It doesn't supplant the free market. It doesn't supplant the individual. It doesn't supplant our ideological or political differences. It supplements the growth of the nation and the quality of life. And I think the issue locally is preparedness, and that's going to be part of it, education, in particular public education, and the investment that we need to make in those babies going forward. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman. First off, want to thank everybody for your patience and understanding this morning. We are creating something different today. We are here in a small audience outdoors, but we're also streaming live. We recognize that there's people that are still not comfortable being out and engaging, but we still want to reach them. And if you think back again to last year, that was crucial. It was important to stay home and stay safe, but that did not mean isolation. And that's where groups, organizations help. They help connect us. Today, we're going to hear from Dr. Hammond, who's going to share some insights with us that affect Tucson and Southern Arizona. We will also hear from the panel and hear their insights from different areas of our city, leaders who are firsthand experiencing and connecting with community. So thank you again for your patience. If you want to engage on social media, we're on there right now, live, so you can wave. And again, this time it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hammond, who's going to speak to us. He could not be here. He is one of those individuals that we respect and understand, still needs to maintain social distance, but through the beauty of technology, we get to see him right over there.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here today. My name is George Hammond. I'm director of the Economic and Business Research Center in the Eller College of Management at the University of Arizona. My job today is to give you a bit of an overview on how the Tucson economy is doing at the moment and where we're headed over the next year or so. Well, I think we can all agree that last year was a real roller coaster ride. The pandemic began in March with stay-at-home orders, and we saw Tucson's employment drop by about 44,000 jobs from February to April. That was about an 11% drop. It was similar to what the state experienced, but not as bad as the February to April decline nationally. And just to put that 11% drop in perspective for you, that was actually worse than what Tucson went through during the Great Recession, that period from roughly 2007 to 2010. So Tucson gets hit hard with about a 44,000 job loss. As the stay-at-home order is lifted, Tucson adds back about half of those jobs through May and June. Now, since June, we've added about 5,000 jobs. Which leaves us overall at about 20,000 jobs below where we were in February of last year. So overall, Tucson's experience so far during the recovery has been not quite as good as what we've seen in Phoenix. Tucson's jobs are about 5% below where they were in February of 2020. Phoenix is about 4% below. But Flagstaff and Yuma got hit significantly harder during the downturn and have had an even slower recovery. So what we've seen across the state has been very uneven. Now, overall, the industries that got hit hardest by the pandemic were, as we might expect, the travel and tourism related sectors. So restaurants and bars, hotels and motels, the amusement sector, so jobs at theaters, gyms, also got hit pretty hard. Now, the job losses in leisure and hospitality account for about half of the 20,000 jobs that Tucson is below where we were in February of 2020. We've also seen job losses in local government, primarily in the education sector, as schools have been shut down. We've also seen significant job losses in professional and business services. Most of those job losses are in temporary employment agencies, kind of contract type jobs, and those are often the first to go during a downturn. We've also seen significant job losses in education and healthcare, and that reflects the fact that most of us were not comfortable going back to our regular doctors, dentists, physical therapy appointments during the pandemic as we were prior to the pandemic. In addition, we had actually restrictions on elective surgeries at certain points during the pandemic. So overall, Tucson gets hit hard. We are in the process of recovering, but we still have a deep hole to dig out of. Those 20,000 jobs, that's a significant amount of employment to recover. But we are making good progress. Let's talk a little bit about the federal relief funds that have flowed into the state. Through the CARES Act, through the kind of the follow-up to the CARES Act that was enacted in late December, and the American Rescue Plan, which was just enacted, that has and will generate a significant amount of federal funds flowing into Arizona. The CARES Act alone brought $30 billion into the state economy, and that generated a significant increase in overall personal income. Just to give you a sense of that, Arizona's personal income rose by over 13% in the second quarter of 2020. And that was during the depths of the downturn. Personal income rose by almost 10% in the third quarter, and it will rise significantly in the fourth quarter and as we go through 2021 as well. And it's the federal funds that are really driving that increase in Arizona's personal income, especially during the second and third quarters of last year. So those federal funds, which have reflected expanded unemployment insurance benefits, the Paycheck Protection Program, and other programs, have really helped the state recover. So what other industries have been hard hit? We want to keep in mind that small businesses in particular have suffered significantly during the pandemic. About 3/4 of small businesses in Arizona and nationally report that they were either moderately or significantly impacted by the pandemic. So small businesses have really been hit hard, especially small businesses in the travel and tourism sector. What sectors have done well? Well, there's really one sector that stood out among all of the others during the pandemic, and that's the trade, transportation, and warehousing sector. Retail trade jobs are pretty much back to where they were before the pandemic began. Transportation and warehousing jobs are actually significantly above where they were in February of 2020. And that reflects the expanded use that we're all making of online services and delivery services. So that sector has done really well. Overall retail trade jobs and retail sales have done much better than we expected going into the pandemic. Part of that is due to this huge infusion of relief funds coming from the federal government. But there are other factors as well. For those of us who were able to work from home and keep our jobs during the pandemic, we essentially saw checking account balances rising significantly. And what was causing that was the fact that we just weren't able or weren't willing to go out and visit restaurants and bars, to travel, or to go to ball games or gyms or theaters. And that left significant balances in checking accounts of people who kept their jobs and who benefited from the relief funds coming into the state. And that generated, increased purchases of cars, TVs, appliances, pretty much all tangible goods with the exception of apparel. For those of us who worked at home during the pandemic, none of us bought shoes during the past year. So overall retail sales activity has done much better than expected, but of course the purchases of services related to travel and tourism are down significantly. So let's talk a little bit about the outlook going forward. The Tucson economy is recovering. We are adding jobs as vaccinations continue and spread throughout our population. That will help. The federal funds coming through the American Rescue Plan will help to support economic activity. As we get into later this year, second half of the year, particularly towards the fourth quarter of this year, we'll see that travel and tourism industry really start to pick up some steam. And for the state as a whole, I think by the end of 2021, we'll be back to employment levels that are pretty close to where we were before the pandemic began. For Tucson, probably early 2022 or so before that happens. But Tucson won't be far behind the state economy. I think both Tucson and Arizona will recover before the nation does. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. We are going to gradually start to pick up steam as long as the vaccinations go well, continue to spread throughout, and as long as the virus variants do not become resistant to the vaccines that we already have. So, as usual during the past year, we've been talking about the outbreak was going to determine how things went, and that will go for this year as well. If the virus can be controlled by the vaccines that we have and we don't develop a new variant that's resistant, then we're going to make good progress in getting more and more vaccines out faster and faster, and that means that the recovery will continue on a fairly rapid pace as we go through this year. So most sectors of the state economy will really start to pick up steam. That will include travel and tourism sectors as well. So that will conclude my prepared remarks. I thank you very much for your time. It's great to see you all. I hope I can be with you in person next year. Have a great event and take care.
Very nice. Thank you to Dr. Hammond. He gave us a lot to think about, didn't he? Very good. Next, it's my pleasure to bring up our panel. We're going to start with our moderator, Ms. Kenesha Raymond. I'd like to thank the following individuals in advance for their time. Ted Maxwell, if you can please join us from Salk. CEO. Ms. Marisol Flores Aguirre from Eller College. Great question. Liz Pocock, CEO from Startup Tucson. And Danny Nee, Executive Director of CIC.
Thank you guys for having us. I'm gonna stand, one, because the sun is shining for it. Two, because I like to see people. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Sure.
Danny in those gloves. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
I don't want to get him sick.
Oh, okay.
We have to.
I
we-
trust you.
You trust me? All right. All right.
Okay, so this year has been a beast for all of us, especially in the small business space and working with entrepreneurs. So we're not going to look back because we all know what happened. We're going to look forward to see what this next year looks like and how we can be resilient in this time. So I'm going to open the floor to the panelists, and we're going to start with questions. So whoever wants to answer the question will go that way. How have businesses and organizations transformed their operations? And what will we need more or less as we move forward?
Well, it's like the congressman said, there's obviously a lot of good that can come out of a bad situation. I think in some of the transformation of business, you've seen it. How many people knew what Zoom was, 15 months ago? How many envisioned we'd be at this environment, having a in-person meeting and having it live streamed?
Yes.
The technologies that we've been exposed to, the technologies that the companies that have had to turn to in order to thrive and get through the economy. We've talked about the impact on brick and mortar. We've talked about the impact on the hospitality sector, tourism. It's been brutal. We've seen that in Tucson. The impact on the restaurants has been crazy. But the economy has had bright spots. You heard some of the numbers Mike Hammond referred to. And Those are predominantly the larger companies, the companies that conduct business throughout, don't necessarily have the interface with the public per se, but they conduct business with each other. And they've learned to become more efficient because they've had to. We've learned that what we used to think was good use of time maybe was not such a good use of time. I mean, I think we're all at the point we don't like 7 straight hours of Zoom meetings anymore, or any virtual connectivity. But you think about the amount of time we used to spend before in transitioning from one meeting or one discussion to another. There was always extra time. And I think even if you look at the large scale corporations in this country, which used to fly quarterly their leadership from all their different locations throughout the nation into a single site to have a meeting, they haven't missed a beat in some of these companies, and they've recognized it through technology. So I think the technology that we've embraced has to continue to be the solution. It will not be going back to business as usual as we continue to come out of the economy. And I think that's going to be the greatest gain at some point that we're going to look back into. What did we gain from having to deal with all the tragedy of the pandemic?
Yes.
I'll
Liz?
comment from the small business side and the entrepreneurship side. So as Ted said, a lot of our big companies have seen a change in work style, but I think we're also seeing a pivot with a lot of the entrepreneurs that Kenesha and I work with. So for those of you that don't know, Startup Tucson is a nonprofit here in Tucson, Arizona. We serve entrepreneurs at the beginning of their journey. We also tend to help them kind of pivot if they need to. So we were very busy. We've been very busy over the last year. We pivoted to do all of our services online. And what we've discovered as we worked with entrepreneurs is entrepreneurs are scrappy. They really are the lifeblood of our economy, especially our local economy. We saw a return to localism from consumers, and we saw our entrepreneurs looking really hard on how to fill the gaps in our community. So we saw a lot more entrepreneurs coming in that were looking to solve a particular problem that they saw in Tucson, and what could they do to kind of help that along, whether that was food delivery or pickups or kind of these different things. We saw a lot of necessity entrepreneurship, which is when somebody's been displaced from a job and now they need to support their family, so they're turning to entrepreneurship as a way to kind of support their lifestyle moving forward. And we saw a lot of pivots. So a lot of people that previously were a brick and mortar, now they need to learn skills in e-commerce. They need to put up a Shopify store. They need to understand how to interact with their customers in a different way. And so while we did see a lot of loss in our community, and I think that was experienced by a lot of businesses and individuals, we've also seen a lot of really great resiliency. And we are doing a new component of our idea funding competition that's coming up this April, and we had a really cool new addition where the community could actually nominate businesses in our community that had done something during COVID that showed resiliency. So some sort of pivot. And the applications that came in, Kenesha and I were just blown away. So, hundreds of applications of our community recognizing business owners that had made a pivot that then supported and solved a new problem. So I'm optimistic that our entrepreneurs will save us. And I think that they've shown some of that now.
I'll say one thing from the nonprofit perspective, because sometimes it's forgotten that we are part of the economy as well, employ a lot of people here in Arizona. And one of the things that, and to Ted's point, is that nonprofits have rarely been early adopters of technology, and in fact are often behind. And I think what we will see, what I've seen in the nonprofit community, is the same sort of shift that you see in businesses, and hopefully I hope that it persists beyond this, where investing in technology, where we're not using the computers that are 10 years behind, and the operating systems that Microsoft is about to stop supporting, those types of things. Because I think it's important. I don't think that we can go back from what we've seen and do business as usual going forward.
So I'll jump in again. My name is Marisol Flores Aguirre, and I just wanted to begin by just acknowledging the traditional homelands of where we are here in this space and time, the traditional homelands of the Tohono people, as well as Yoeme Pascuayaqui Tlamanalca people as well. Wanted to also say that I speak on my behalf, and I don't represent the university in this capacity here. So Now that I got that stuff out of the way, and I forgot the original question, I can build here on like what my peers said. And so I think one of the things, having worked in nonprofit, having worked in economic development, small business, entrepreneurship, and now also teaching entrepreneurship at the university, what we're seeing is definitely this resourcefulness. We call it scrappiness, we call it grit, el que tiene ganas, right? Hace más el que quiere que el que puede. We've seen that coming out. But we've also seen the ways in which this pandemic didn't affect all sectors equally, and it didn't affect all people equally, and it didn't affect all business owners equally. And so one of the things that we saw was that some of the gaps that we knew existed were even more widely amplified, right? So when we look at who's starting businesses in our communities, George Hammond talks a lot about it. I know all of our panelists here talk about who's starting new businesses and who's stimulating the economy from a small business to middle business perspective. A lot of them are women. A lot of them are people of color. And so when we look at the ways in which capital and access to capital hasn't always been available, it's also an opportunity for us to start to think about how do we transform whatever this new normal is, right? So I know that we've talked halfway through the pandemic, we were talking about the new normal, and it's the new normal, and online Zoom meetings for 8 hours a day is new normal. And you know, I was joking with somebody that this is the first time I think I'm like fully dressed. I don't know about y'all, this is like my first outing. So I'm like, don't be weird, right? Like, don't make it weird. But you know, on Zoom, you're like, I'm wearing pajama pants and this is my professional top, right? And so as we come back and reimagine what else are we gonna be doing? What else is possible? I'm really excited about the ways in which we can get innovative in changing this next phase that we go into. And I think that has everything to do not only with entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Southern Arizona and across the country, but also us as consumers, because now we recognize even more so the value of our own dollar and that we vote with our dollar, right? We place emphasis with where we spend our money. So I'll share that much for now.
By the way, Marisol, I bought 4 pairs of sweatpants. I know he said nobody's buying shoes. 4 pairs of sweatpants during
Hey, were they
the pandemic.
50% off? Because that's where I'm shopping these days.
Statistics show that 77% of women, they start businesses faster than most men, and people of color are on a high rise of starting businesses. So as we're going into this next phase of whatever our new normal is, we've seen a ton of organizations and businesses collapse, unfortunately. But what does that mean for our recovery in the economy going forward in 2021?
Well, I think in terms of the collapse, it's one of the really unfortunate things. It does create opportunity for small businesses, for entrepreneurs, this complete shift in sort of how we're doing business. So there are reasons to be optimistic. However, I think as Marisol pointed out, we can't back away from the fact that the impact was felt so much more by communities of color, women leaving the workplace. These are places, as somebody who's worked in nonprofit for 20 years, these are places that those were hard-won gains that I feel like we've seen a step back from. I certainly hope it highlights some of the issues. I would say in many cases, especially as we've seen some of the wealthier people see their wealth increase during this time. What we need to understand is not necessarily something people talk about redistribution of wealth, but redistribution of opportunity. We work, Community Investment Corporation, we work with small businesses and entrepreneurs, and we work on capital access. And one of the things that we've seen is, I occasionally say flippantly that if you're not a white dude, you've been underserved by our capital access system. Basically the statistics bear that out. And I think that we need to do more to see what some of the fundamental issues are with capital access. It's so important for entrepreneurs and businesses. The idea is a both and approach. It's not an either or approach. It's not, take it from one place, give it to somewhere else, but make sure that that people, these entrepreneurs, especially where we've seen losses, the people that have been hardest hit, that we try to make capital available for them to recover, to start anew. I think those things are really important. I do hope that people, again, come out of this and see sort of how interconnected we are, how fragile our economy actually is. And I'll just say, sort of in the first couple weeks of the pandemic when we saw the shutdowns, and you always hear people, I'm probably one of the people, financial literacy, saying everybody should have 6 months, socked away for a rainy day. Well, our U.S. economy didn't have 6 months stocked away for a rainy day. In the first 2 weeks of shutdowns, we saw, incredible ripple effects. And so we need to understand just how close to the edge people are at times. And instead of the idea of some of the resiliency that we hear about and see, has to do with how much wealth somebody had coming into the pandemic, and so we just need to be aware of that, and how do we create wealth and create opportunities for everyone across our economy.
Sorry, I'm like, who's ever taking? Go ahead. So I think just to build on that, I think one of the things that we've also seen is, and this is my always my big push, because I think that the studies definitely show that as well, which is when you invest in women, you invest in families, you invest in economies, you invest in the circulation of resources. Women can make a check stretch, and we definitely see that in working class communities, we see that in more affluent communities, we see that in middle class communities. And so I think, to Danny's point, even rethinking and reimagining, right? And that's the conversation that I really want to invite folks to think about, is what are we reimagining for ourselves as we move past this pandemic, as we move through it, and as, we prepare for our life after, right? Because I think if we go back to doing things the way they've always been done, then we really miss an opportunity to explore what else is possible. Because just like we were able to do jobs at home that, we've been told probably forever, you can't do your job at home. How are you going to do your job at home? Well, we've done it, right, for the last year and a half. And so I think part of it is about accessibility, in terms of how do we make things more accessible? How do we make things more achievable for folks to be able to transform the ways in which the economy works for them? I think part of it is looking at how has access to capital, and we'll talk about access to capital today because that's fundamental to any business, right? It's the lifeblood of a business, is how much cash reserve do they have? And I think that how do we access capital? How do we talk about zero interest loans? I know that there's community partners like CIC that are looking at that and saying, can we change the way that we do lending in our community? And I think that is one very significant way that we can change the way that we do that. How do we look at debt forgiveness? How do we look at really opening up channels for innovation and the work that y'all are doing in terms of equipping entrepreneurs to answer the call now to this new landscape? And I think that all sounds kind of like up here, right? And everybody maybe has different ideas of what that looks like. But I think that as we put that into practice, partners like Startup Tucson are going to be more important than ever to be able to close the gap that we know exists.
This is a tough act to follow, because I'm sitting up on stage with three organizations that are having an incredible impact on the startup community, the opportunity, the growth, giving people a chance. And I think it's all critical. We want to talk about the future of the economy in Tucson. It's a holistic ecosystem that we have to worry about. It truly is. And up to this point during the pandemic, there has been a lot of federal funds that have been inserted to keep all companies, all businesses trying to go forward. We know the hospitality sector, we know the restaurants. So those, when people stop spending money and stop leaving home, they are crushed. So we know the areas that we need to focus on. The difficult choices are going to be, what areas are we focusing on going forward? And the startup community, having a vibrant innovation system that allows people opportunities, attracts business. It's going to attract the larger employers. It's going to attract the employees. You can't forget that the economy is that whole. It's not just the opportunity for a young company, a small company, for individuals. You need those large employers as well. Those large employers have to stay. They have to want to be there. They have to see opportunity. But what's important is the funds to support business get smaller and smaller, is to have targeted investments. And completely agree that where's the good ROI? That's creating a new business. And it's not just creating a business here in Tucson. We have to give it the economy that they want to stay in Tucson. They want to grow in Tucson. That's how we're going to make a difference. But I'll tell you, between the McGuire Entrepreneurship School, between Startup Tucson, between CIC, we've got all the places for an innovation economy and opportunity. And honestly, just look around this patio today. I think there's more women sitting in this patio than anything. So we know that they've proven time and time again that it's about the individual. It's not about what we look like. That's what's going to drive business, and we got to keep investing where we can make that impact.
Okay, I'm not going to even go. Women are very powerful, and we are a big part of business, and we support the economy more than most big businesses. So let's talk about your spending habits, because we have all shopped during this pandemic. I know I've gotten animals and roller skates and top clothes because they're wonderful. What consumer behaviors have you seen sustained during this time, and how will this impact our financial recovery?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm probably going to give you the answer you're not looking for. Okay. One is, to me, there's been some spending. I was almost going to say, I'm sure people have been spending on shoes. It's still an important thing that they do. But I think there's been a lot of sectors that have prospered, some of the outdoor sectors, anything that we can do outside. And I think we're looking forward to the opportunity of doing more outside as we go forward. Mm-hmm. But the thing we have to do is we have to get everybody comfortable with going back out. We're not going to recover the restaurant industry. We're not going to recover the arts. We're not going to recover the stages and the entertainment until we get to a place where we are comfortable going forward. So what I want to get away from, and I am as guilty as anybody, I've got more Amazon boxes and that lining up at the door all the time. We've got to get back to buying locally as well. And that's going to be a big challenge. And until we're all comfortable going out to support those fun things, we've got to be comfortable going out to support the businesses in our area too, if they're going to make a turn. A lot of the startups, Liz will talk about it at length, they're all incredibly e-commerce and technology focused. But there are still individuals in this community, particularly the communities of color and some of the communities of poverty. They want to start businesses in their area. They want to grow something. They're not looking to have the next, Amazon. They're looking to have a business that they can sustain, that's going to improve their quality of life and improve their sector. We've got to be comfortable getting back out and basically being patrons to help that growth.
Yeah, so we've seen, in terms of consumer behavior that we've been tracking, definitely a shift to e-commerce, so Amazon and otherwise. I do think there's been a shift, at least right at the beginning of the pandemic, to supporting more local. So we were really good at it when it first started, right? All those lists came out for Tucson about all the restaurants and how you could buy gift cards and how you could support them. And we did a program called Tucson Shops Tucson that was to help retail merchants can figure out how to convert their goods to online, and they could support them there. And then I think we maybe got a little used to being in COVID and in our houses, and it got a little bit easier to order on DoorDash and maybe order on Amazon. And so I think as a community, we need to be looking at how do we continue to support our local entrepreneurs, especially our female entrepreneurs, our entrepreneurs of color. How do we support these businesses as they get up and going? And how do we as an economic development community invest in programs that will allow them to respond to some of these changes that they need to make in their businesses? So they can have the brick and mortar, but for them to be resilient, should this ever happen again, they need to have a website. And we need to help them get there and be comfortable with that. And so we've been listening a lot. A lot of what Startup Tucson does is listen. So we've been trying to listen to our entrepreneurs. What are they struggling with the most, and how can we support them in taking those next steps so that when we look at the future, they're both embedded in our community, but they also are resilient should something like this happen again, so that as consumer behavior shifts and changes, they're ready to make a pivot next time or to respond. And so I think that's what we've seen.
While not an answer to your question exactly, building on what you said, Liz, I think one of the things that I would say I would love to see is that there are opportunities now with things like crowdfunded equity and different types of crowdfunding where we can support local businesses. Up to this point, in the economy, mostly it was angel investors or venture capitalists who could own pieces of business. And now with things like crowdfunded equity, which has been around 5 years, there have been some important changes with the SEC this year. I would love to see, and what's funny is we don't have to invest anything in the infrastructure. It already exists. But what we probably need to do is organize around it and have this idea of like local investment, almost like those local investment clubs, get some coffee clutches and things like that who want to invest in local businesses, startups, early stage businesses. And we can support locally. We can do that with a return, not just, granting or those types of things. We're talking about return on investments. And so I think, I know Liz and I have talked about it a little bit. We would love to figure out a way to get some momentum around something like that, because I actually think there's a pent-up demand for it. People want to know, how do I help a local business? And yes, going and shopping there, if they're that type of business, is great. If they're retail, coffee, those types of things. But if you're not, we have all these other types of businesses that we want to support, and we shouldn't necessarily just wait for the angel investment or the VC to help them. There's stuff that we can do ourselves to support those those up and coming local businesses.
Anything for me? Okay. Kiva has been around for a while, but last year the community came together and really supported CIC and got some businesses funded. And going forward, I'm not used to the mic thing. Going forward, I know we are all working towards making sure our businesses stay alive. So you'll see a lot of small businesses come out with Kiva. So make sure that either you connect with one of us, because we're going to get a group together to make sure we can keep our small businesses alive, since they are possibly 80% of the businesses in our city. How have consumer behaviors transformed, and how will this impact our economy?
I can start. I think that part of what we're seeing, right, when I said that we every day that we are spending our dollar, especially now, we are essentially casting a vote, right, for like some of the things that we want and that we need. And so Congressman Grijalva talked a little bit about sustainability, right, and that's kind of at the forefront for a lot of people in terms of this. Sorry, now there's like F1 whatever fighters over me, so sorry about that. But I think that part of that is also looking at Eller, we talk about CSR and corporate social responsibility and how businesses are being responsive to the needs of our environment and of our climate and of our communities. And so we're able to, I think, make more informed decisions when we're spending money. And I think that puts a lot of power back in the consumer, because we have a lot more, I think, capacity to make purchases that are more informed. And I think that that's one way that we're transforming the ways in which we spend our money. I think Ted said something super important, which is that it's not an either or, right? We're talking a lot about small business mostly because you have, 3 folks up here that focus on small business. That's what we do every single day. And it isn't an either or. We do need investment in the private sector and the larger sectors that are bringing, thousands of jobs into our communities. But we also need those employers to make sure that their wages are staying up with where they need to be, so that we can have a robust economy, right? There's like science behind why stimulus packages are coming out and why things are happening this way, so that we can continue to invest our money and our resources back into our economy to keep it afloat and to keep prosperity going throughout our country. And so I think that as we look at that, and as we look at not only what do employers have to offer employees, it's also the ways in which employees have capacity now to ask for more from their employer, the same way that we as consumers have an opportunity to ask for more from where we're spending our money. Are you roasting over there? I'm like, it's hot out here.
I would also say, and Ted mentioned it too. He mentioned about outdoor, investing in sort of the outdoor economy in many ways, and that could be patios and those types of things. I think one of the things also in terms of consumer behavior, and I don't know how long it will persist. I hope it does, but I think all of us don't like the science fiction world that we've lived in for the past year. We don't want to live virtually. We miss our favorite places, our favorite brick and mortar places that we go. We miss gathering with one another for festivals and those types of things. We've made the best of it as we've gone through this. But I actually think there's going to be this, incredible pent-up demand and people just really wanting to go to those places again, and making a place to go. And hopefully, as we think about it too, and I don't know how you make it, pandemic proof, but the idea of having more outdoor spaces and businesses, because if there is another pandemic, we would understand what might help to mitigate some of the issues that you might have. But again, I just think that the contrast, sometimes you don't know what you missed until it's gone, and then you're just dying to get back to it. And so I do think that will be something coming out of this.
And I've already kind of said what I think we need to do as far as getting out of those habits we've gotten into in the last year and a half. But I want to point something out. We've got so many distinguished leaders, partners with us today from Mexico. One of the important issues for the economy in this region is we have to get the borders open back up. And when I mean the borders open back up, I mean flow both ways. We know the impact that the inability for the Mexican citizens and visitors to come over our border over the holidays, it was significant. It was significant to our restaurants. It was significant to the shopping centers. It's significant to our economy. And I spoke with Congressman Grijalva about making sure that you address and get the administration to work on opening those borders, both from Canada and Mexico. I think we're doing everything we can to make this a safe environment to be in. We need to get the visitors back here because for our region, the cross-border business plays such a huge factor in our economy. We've got to keep that going.
We're going to take a minute to have water and not roast.
This is Scott Odom. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Vantage West Credit Union. And to me, the shape of this economic recovery, for credit unions anyway, is a U. We are not experiencing a lot of loan losses, which has been positive since there's been a lot of stimulus and we've taken measures to assist our members. But it's also not a good environment for us from a interest rate perspective. Having ultra low interest rates expected for a long period of time is a very challenging environment for a community banking institution. However, I would say overall the recovery in the economic environment has been a V shape with a dramatic improvement in GDP and unemployment since the depths of the worst part of the pandemic. And I think underneath that V is a lot of different letters for a lot of different people and businesses, from V to L to even a J shape for some that are actually improving throughout this time frame. Thanks.
Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities.
We invite you to participate in the Base Plus program. This program is brought to you by the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Millennium International, and Vibin. This is a 10-week course where we help businesses identify opportunities and establish systems of growth. This is a 10-week course that will take place every Tuesday and every Wednesday from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. So if you're interested in participating and want to get resources and knowledge, please call 520-620-005 or visit the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce website.
We're going to wrap this up with a nice question about how we're going to continue to grow over this year. So what are we seeing emerging, and how will this impact our economic recovery over the year?
All right, I guess I start. I'm not shy to start, but I think there's a couple things. We've got the right folks working and trying to help our businesses grow and get back to doing what they want to do and prosper in the future. We just had the American Relief Plan that came out. It's got a lot of money that will be invested at the state and local governments. And that money and how they spend that money is going to be really critical for the future growth of our region. So I think it's important that the local governments, both the cities, the counties, and realize, I mean, Tucson's going to get about 140 million, Pima County's going to get about 200 million, even Oro Valley, Sarita, Marana, they're all going to get some funding from this, that they're going to have some, I won't call it totally discretionary because they've got categories there. But it's important, at least from SLC's perspective, that they invest in something that will have a long-term impact. It's going to probably be one-time investment. It's going to be hard to justify investing in something that's going to have a long, sustainable need for funds. But you can find investments that will affect this region for years to come and support the continued growth of our businesses. And I think how the state, how the county, how the cities and the municipalities invest that money will have as much impact on the growth of our economy in the next several years as anything.
So in terms of, I think one change we're going to see is the way that we work. So I think we touched on this a little bit before, but I think you're going to see more companies shifting to being partially remote and in person, and that's going to change some of the way that our real estate works, some of the way that our co-working space works. I don't think that all that is necessarily negative. I don't think it means we're going to end up with a bunch of empty buildings. I just think it's going to be a change, and we as a community need to think about how we make sure that those retail spaces remain and those office buildings remain occupied, but in a way that's supportive of this new kind of work-life balance. I think we are seeing a lot of that. We ran a program this year called Remote Tucson. So I think, and the concept of Remote Tucson was that remote workers could relocate to Tucson and continue to work remotely for their employer. So we welcomed 10 new remote workers through the program. They work for Facebook, Reddit, Salesforce. They came from San Francisco, New York, Chicago. So we as Tucson, with our great quality of life and sunny, although a little bit warm right this second, environment, really have an opportunity to attract some new talent to our community because they can work wherever they need to and still be a part of our community and support by investing their dollars here. So I think we need to be keep our eyes open for those opportunities, both supporting our startups in that and our entrepreneurs, but also kind of looking to what we could maybe accomplish.
I definitely agree with Ted in the part of investing in, and I think part of it is even our infrastructure here, so that we do become a destination for businesses, where this is a place that people see that you can start up a business and succeed. There's the talent that's here. There's the infrastructure you need. At the same time, that we can also become a destination, and not just a destination for tourism, but a destination for remote workers. We do have an amazing quality of life. One thing I do want to point out, again, nonprofit guy, we work with eviction prevention right now. Over 500 people right now are on a waiting list to get assistance to make sure that they can stay in their homes, an important part of the stimulus that's coming out. And any community really does have to care about its population and its community. You can't have 5,000 people get evicted, and that's not what's going to happen, but you can't have 5,000 people get evicted and think that the quality of life is going to thrive and think that business is going to thrive. I think Ted, you would probably agree with that as well. So we also need to make sure that we are looking at our vulnerable population as well. And that isn't just from a social service mindset. That's from a business mindset. These quality of life indicators are really important in attracting business, attracting people who want to come here. And so I hope we'll also have that conversation while we're talking about business as well.
I think the only thing that I'll add is it's important to remember that we're not done with the pandemic, right? Like, this feels a little bit more normal, but I'm sitting up here with like a mask and 2 gloves, right? Like, we're not done. And so I think that that's something that's really important to think about and remember, especially as we're talking about how do we revitalize our economy, or how is our economy going to grow, is also the people impact that's on the receiving end of that, right? 570,000 folks so far, Americans have passed away. And I think that you can't underestimate the social, the emotional, the societal, but also the economic impact of what 570,000 folks is. And that's only folks who have passed and not folks that are just sick and recovering. So I think that that's one thing that's important. I think on that note, public health was my undergrad, so always a push for vaccinations, right? I think that that's going to be continuously important as we move forward and as we start to look at how do we reopen safer, right? Because there's no safe yet. There's like more safe. There's safer, I guess, is the only way that I can think about that. But how do we make sure that folks that want to be vaccinated can be, right? So that we can amplify our capacity to do more together, because that's what we want to be. We want to be together. We miss each other. We miss having fun, going out. I think to Ted's point, one of the things he said that really stuck out to me was how do we continue to engage with our trade neighbor to the south, because they're one of our most important economic partners. And how do we do that in a way that's mutually beneficial, right? So that we can increase that commerce, that trade, that travel, and do it in a safer way.
Okay, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, anyone? Oh. Okay, ask your question. I
have a question for Mr. Nee. She actually also processes PPP loans. Is that correct?
We actually do not. No, Business Development Finance Corporation is one of our partners in the community that does. We will help people go through the process to find a partner to process those, but we don't ourselves.
Because that right now is reopened again, and there's going to be even more emphasis on it for all those businesses that have suffered economically. So it's a great tool that the government is putting out again. Thank you.
And I think they've done a better job the first time through, which is always hard. You're in a real rush and a crisis, and the equity around it, they've made sure it's more equitable this time around, not just those who had the best business relationships before. And so we're very hopeful for that third round of PPP loans.
Anyone else? Oh, we'll come over here and then we'll go to Kimber.
So I don't want to speak for Joe Snell and the folks at Sun Corridor Inc., but I talk with Joe a lot because we've got a very close working relationship. We do the policy, they do the attraction. And the interesting thing is they too have adjusted. They've adjusted, and they actually closed a deal that was announced a couple months ago that the folks never saw Tucson, ever. They didn't step here, but they were able to demonstrate the opportunity, the workforce, the quality of life, the ability to attract employees, and that company chose to move here without ever seeing Tucson. actually bought a location. So it is ongoing. They've actually been very, very successful through what you call the downturn of the pandemic. They were still averaging about an announcement a month, if not more. So it's there. The biggest thing that's changed is the site selectors have been making their moves. And for any of those of you that are aware with how businesses make decisions of where they're going to locate, they rely heavily on an organization, a small organization of site selectors. They are now at the point where they're starting to open up, and as that goes, Oscar, I think you'll see things pick back up. But the reality is, we've talked a lot about things today. We've got to focus on what Tucson's strengths are, and the University of Arizona and JTED and Pima Community Colleges, they create a workforce of all levels, you know, from those requiring advanced degrees all the way to those that are getting certifications that are required for future jobs. We've got a strong workforce out there, and Danny already alluded to it. How are we going to address the needs of the people that need help or need an opportunity? We've got to have jobs. We've got to have opportunities to give people the chance to take a step forward in their life. And when we make investments, we have to think of it that way. Where's the highest ROI? And quite often that's in the communities that need the help the most. It's not put money into where money already is. It's a matter of finding out how can we provide that opportunity. So, Oscar, to answer your question, it's ongoing, it's close, and between the ACI, I mean, people are still coming to Arizona. This is still a destination state for business, and we just need to get more of the destination here versus other parts of the state right now.
Kendall?
Sorry, I just wanted to add that one of the things I think that's super important as well is how do we retain the talent that we have, right? The University of Arizona is an incredibly world-renowned institution, but you know, time and time again, if y'all are from Tucson and went to undergrad or grad school at U of A or anywhere really, there's nothing to do in Tucson, right? What are we doing in Tucson? And there's been this myth about that's circulated, and I think that's starting to change. But how do we retain that talent, right? It's always, I mean, in business, it's easier to keep a client than to get a client. And so how do we retain that talent that's coming out of our universities, out of our JTED programs, because it's an incredibly important sector as well, out of our community colleges, so that they can live and stay in their communities and give back to their community that's nurtured them and taken care of them, and not lose them to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that kind of ties into my question, Oscar, exactly what you're speaking to, which is downtown Tucson is positioning themselves for this growth and for this opportunity. And also there's an article that came out that rent is almost topping $4,000 a month.
Yep.
Do you all feel like there's a market to serve that? Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm like,
Well,
now you're starting a new panel, Kendall.
Yeah.
That's a whole new panel right there.
I hope it's the next one. That way they can lead into. It's a tough question. I mean, that's something we've talked about. Gentrification is always a challenge. You want an area to thrive. Well, guess what? When it's thriving, more people want to go there. And ultimately, just look no further than the housing market right now. It is absolutely incredible. I mean, it is there's a shortage of houses anywhere in this region. It's booming. And you want where people are moving to. And people are going there, and so it's tough. You got to let supply and demand play out, but you've got to make sure that you've got the ability to support all the folks in that region. And it's a challenge. And I wish we had better answers, but I don't think any of us do.
Kendall, so the only thing I'll add to that, I think, without going too far down the line, is that I think we need to talk about affordability. And I think that we absolutely have the mechanics and the capacity to do that. And I think that the city, the county, private investors need to come together and work together on this, because this is a human condition, problem, however, opportunity even. And so there's a lot of smart folks here that can help solve that. And I think that there needs to be a conversation and an honest conversation. I think there's a lot of folks in the community talking about the gentrification issue, but we want to be able to live and work here, right? We want to be able to stay in our homes and to welcome folks that want to come and be part of our communities as well. But we need to create some kinds of infrastructure and support so that our communities can thrive, so that all communities can be welcome. But definitely I think that there are some capacities to create affordability and to have that honest conversation to put that in motion.
So my background's actually in housing. I was a deputy director of Habitat for Humanity Tucson for 8 years. And so housing affordability is I do think it's a big issue, and there's a little bit of a misnomer around Tucson being very, very affordable. It is an affordable city, but when we talk about affordability of housing, what doesn't happen, and I don't know the exact mechanism, but what we think about is when people say this number of units are affordable to people under the area median income, it doesn't mean that those people are actually getting into those homes. Somebody who makes more and can afford more will often can fill that house. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm not trying to make some policy statement around that, but I do think there is a little bit of a misnomer around that. Certainly, we're also considered a low-wage city. There's that issue. Some of the housing market right now is exacerbating the issue with evictions that we're seeing. And I should have said before, this is a two-sided issue to the eviction prevention. There are eviction moratoriums. Again, we could have another panel about it, but there are landlords who haven't been paid for a very long time, and that's a pretty big burden for a public policy on an eviction moratorium as well. So I really, again, and this is one of the things the pandemic, there's no way I'm going to call it a light, but it has put a spotlight on a lot of these issues that just really got worse during this time. Things that they did exist that we kind of, fumbled around with. We're trying to do some things, but I think there's going to have to be some hard conversations about just that. And with gentrification, I don't know that any city has really solved that well, quite honestly, and it's something we'll have to continue to discuss.
Yeah, and come back, because Marcelo made a great point. You've got to have the conversations. And the conversations, the key thing I thought she said was they have to be public and private. You have to get the private investors in there. There are developers in this town who want to develop more affordable housing, but then they run into snags because the requirements placed on them quite often from the public sector. It can't, if it's going to work, it's got to be a collaborative conversation and come up with a solution that's going to be beneficial to the community and to all, not just from one segment or other. It goes back to that, you've got to work together. Congressman Grijalva mentioned on the infrastructure bill, the key they believe is going to be public-private partnerships and investment. And we do not do public-private partnerships well. That's what we need to work on.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Last question, and it's an easy one. What words of encouragement do you have to those different sectors, like from the entrepreneurship, the private sector, the small business? What words of encouragement you have for the future? Like, what advice can you give them right now for them to be able to feel comfortable with what is happening here in Tucson in our community, so that you can share with everybody who's watching right now?
You can go first.
I was waiting for you, Liz.
I would just say, if you look back at your last year as an entrepreneur or small business owner, you've made it this far. If you've made it this far, you can do whatever you want. Like, you came through one of the roughest years that America has ever had, and you came out on the other side. It may feel different, it may look different, but you're still standing. So bring that grit, that scrappiness, that everything that you learned, and pull that through as you continue to think about what could be for your business next.
This might undersell it, but this is not 2008. 2008, when we had an economic crisis driven by a financial crisis. The underlying financial situation is still strong in this region. Have we had sectors that have been devastated? Absolutely, and we need to figure out how to get them coming back. But the underlying economy has a ton of potential in this region. As we get people more comfortable, through increasing the number of vaccinations, seeing the numbers go down. The healthcare system has been doing a phenomenal job in dealing with this pandemic throughout the last year and a half. And as we go forward, they're going to continue to be engaged. The positivity needs to go there, because the fiscal markets, the stock market, we can talk about everything else. The results have proven over the last year that the economy was a lot stronger than we thought it was going to be. It got through this. And so now, if we can have something like the bounce we had coming out of 2008 and that downturn, if we have that from what we've experienced here as we get to that healthier place on top of it, I think the potential for this region's phenomenal.
So I think the encouragement is for the economy. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand is one thing. And so, again, with the vaccinations, I do think we are going to see a good bump. We can feel good about that. I think on the other piece of it is that this is an incredibly tight-knit community. We care very deeply about our local businesses and our local people. The flavor of Tucson, that's why, sorry, no offense to Phoenix. I'm not from Arizona originally. I'm from Northern California. But just Tucson has its own feel and its own flavor. It's unique. And it has to do with our homegrown talent, our local businesses, and everybody could name their, probably name 15 of them off the top of their head. And I think that is something that we're going to lean into in a way that does make for a bright future, that places that don't have that sense, where people aren't as connected to the place that they are going to struggle more with the recovery, whereas we are a place that, we kind of circle the wagons when it gets tough. And again, somebody who's lived in many different places in the country, that's one of the reasons I won't be moving anytime soon. My wife is also a native Tucsonan, so that's part of it too. But quite honestly, I do think that's a really important part. I know that feels like soft and fluffy and those types of things, but we should not underestimate that.
I think we all could use a little more soft and fluffy these days. So I think that that's a good thing. I'll say a couple of things. I think that on the human side of that question, I think it's give yourself permission to take a break sometimes, right? Like, we always are hustling, and that hustle didn't end just because the pandemic started. And for some of us, for a lot of us, it became even more demanding, right? So for folks who had kids, for folks who had people that were dependent on them, it became even more demanding because now there was no separation between where your office was and where your bed was and where your kitchen is and where your kids are. So the acknowledging that human toll that the pandemic has taken on all of us, and give yourself permission, I think, to take a break and then get up again the next day and echarle ganas, to keep working hard. I think that the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to dream even bigger, because I think that now is going to be a time for dreamers, because I think that we have an opportunity as a community to continue to hold each other up, to hold space for one another, and really to transform whatever comes next, because we're here and we're together. And at the end of the day, our community sustained us, one another. We took care of each other. We circled the wagons like Danny talked about. We invested in one another's dreams. And I think that that's what we need to hold on to moving forward.
We're done, right, Kenesha? I'm going to make a shameless plug. Totally shameless. Okay, so Startup Tucson has an event coming up called Idea Funding in April 15th. It's free to attend, all online. We had 80 entrepreneurs apply to pitch. 23 of them have become semifinalists. We're giving away over $50,000 to local businesses and entrepreneurs. I encourage you to tune in that day and support entrepreneurs and our small businesses. We're awarding resiliency prizes. We're awarding prizes for diverse entrepreneurs, for young entrepreneurs out of the university. Basically, everything that we all talked about right now is happening during this event. It's really a community event. There's over, to Danny's point around, the community came together to support this. All the prize money, all the sponsorships that was driven is going right back into the businesses. So I encourage you guys, if you want to support our small businesses, log on that day, see who's out there, see the incredible work that they've done during COVID, and the resiliency that they've built into their businesses, and support them. So startuptucson.com/idea funding.
Isabel, also thank you to the Tucson Hispanic Chamber so much for hosting this. And Ted, Southern Arizona Leadership Council, you didn't get name by name you named all of us, so I just wanted to be shout out to you and your work too.
Well, thank you guys for being here today. Thank you guys for taking my questions and working with me. Remember to shop small. Like, that's the only way we're going to keep Tucson alive. Do it online. Do it in person if you feel comfortable. If you see something on Amazon, go to the person who is selling it and then go to their website and buy it. Like, keep that money in your local economy so we can stay alive through whatever comes next. Stay safe, keep your mask on, and have a good day.
I think we can all agree that was an exceptional panel. Let's give them another hand for sticking with us and being so gracious, especially with this beautiful sunny day. You know, I just want to acknowledge again individually, yes, all of these wonderful people that came to talk to us today, but also the fact that, you know, Liz, you know, sharing something important going on in the community. We need to understand that, yes, there is healthy competition, but that doesn't mean we can't work together. That doesn't mean we can't support each other. I loved what Ted said about, you know, public and private need to work together, you know, and it starts with conversations like we're having today, with sharing information and insights, not only about the impact, but then what is the road to recovery? And, you know, it starts with this. It starts with sharing information, resources, and then working together. We heard it from Congressman Grijalva. We heard it from our panel. And I'm sure that's why all of you are here today, because you want to be part of that. So we invite you to join us again, because this was just the first of many for the rest of the year in terms of round tables. Next month, we'll be speaking on health and wellness. We've already got people chomping at the bit to come and participate. And if you want more information, just visit our website, www.tucsonhispanicchamber.org, or contact us at 520-620-0005. Once again, let's give a hand to this wonderful panel. And if you missed it, you'll be able to see it on all of our social media. Again, we were testing something new today. We streamed this event on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We'll be sure and share it with everybody. Thank you, everybody.
El año 2020 fue una experiencia que nos cambió la vida a todos. A medida que la Cámara de Comercio Hispana de Tucson mira hacia el 2021, los invitamos a que se unen a nuestra conversación de mesas redondas, donde nos reuniremos a discutir lo que está sucediendo y cómo juntos podemos hacer avanzar a nuestra comunidad. Para más información, comuníquese con nosotros al TucsonHispanicChamber.org o llámenos al 520-620-0005. Gracias.
I think it's definitely going to be a K-shaped recovery where those with wealth accumulate more and the vast majority of Americans continue to struggle. 68 to 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Most people can't get access to affordable quality health care. And we have a tax system where, you know, by the percentages, small businesses and individuals pay more than large corporations like Amazon, ExxonMobil, Walmart. So I think it's going to be a long recovery, and I question what we're even recovering back to.
What is the shape of V, a U, or an L? That's a great question. In business, it's cyclical. It goes up, it goes down. Well before the pandemic, it could be a W. So the real question is, what has changed? What is different about our customer patterns and habits? What is different about delivery of product? Asking those questions and learning from them can make a big difference on how we adapt and pivot during this time.